There comes a moment in life when everything changes. Not because you said something, not because you won an argument, not because you finally found the perfect words, but because you stopped. You stopped chasing. You stopped calling first. You stopped forcing conversations that felt one-sided. You stopped trying to earn attention that should have been given freely. And in that moment, something unexpected begins to happen inside her mind. You see, many people think that when a man stops chasing, a woman instantly forgets him. They imagine she simply moves on without a second thought. But reality is often very different. Human beings are wired to notice absence far more than presence. We get used to what is always there. We expect it. We assume it will remain. Yet the moment it disappears, our minds begin searching for it. At first, she may not react. She may act completely normal. She may continue her day, answer messages from others, go to work, spend time with friends, and pretend nothing has changed. But deep down, a small question starts forming. What happened? The person who always checked on her is suddenly quiet. The person who always made the effort is suddenly focused elsewhere. The person whose attention felt guaranteed is no longer available in the same way. And that question begins to grow. Women are naturally observant. They notice patterns. They notice emotional shifts. Even when they don't mention it, they pay attention to changes in behavior. When you stop chasing her, she notices much sooner than most men realize. At first, she wonders if you're busy. Then she wonders if you're upset. Then she wonders if something happened. But eventually, she arrives at the possibility she never expected. Maybe you simply decided to stop, and that thought hits differently because for the first time, she is no longer the center of your focus. For the first time, she doesn't know what you're thinking. For the first time, she doesn't know where she stands. The certainty she once had begins to disappear. And certainty is something people often take for granted until it's gone. She starts remembering things, moments she ignored, conversations she overlooked, efforts she never fully appreciated, the compliments she received, the attention she was given, the support she could always count on. Things that seemed ordinary suddenly become valuable because they're no longer being offered. That's how human nature works. We rarely realize the value of something while it's constantly available. We notice it most when it leaves. Then another thought begins to enter her mind. Is he talking to someone else? Now, understand something important. This isn't necessarily jealousy. It's curiosity. When someone who was once focused on you redirects their energy elsewhere, it naturally raises questions. She begins wondering where your attention has gone. She notices you're no longer reacting to everything she posts. You're no longer seeking her validation. You're no longer trying to impress her. And suddenly, she starts paying closer attention to you than she did before.
Why?
Because mystery has returned. The moment you stop chasing, your life becomes less predictable. And unpredictability creates curiosity. Curiosity creates attention. Attention creates emotional investment. She begins checking things she never checked before. She starts noticing details she once ignored. She starts wondering what you're doing when you're not thinking about her, because now she cannot assume your world revolves around her. Another thought slowly appears. Maybe I underestimated him. This is especially true if she became accustomed to your constant effort. When someone always gives, people can mistakenly assume they always will. When someone always stays, people can mistakenly assume they never leave. When someone always chases, people can mistakenly assume they have no other options. But when you stop chasing, you reveal something powerful. You reveal self-respect. You reveal standards. You reveal the ability to walk away from situations that don't give equal energy in return. And that changes perception. Nothing increases respect more than someone who knows their value. Not arrogance, not ego, not games, just genuine self-respect. The kind that says, I care about you, but I won't lose myself trying to convince you to care about me. That mindset is powerful because it communicates strength without saying a single word. As time passes, another realization may begin to grow inside her. She starts asking herself whether she gave enough when you were chasing. All the focus was on your effort. Now, the focus shifts. Now she begins evaluating her own actions. Did she appreciate you? Did she acknowledge your effort? Did she reciprocate your energy? Did she take your presence for granted? These questions can be uncomfortable because they force honest reflection. And reflection often happens only after distance is created. Distance has a unique way of revealing truths that closeness sometimes hides. When someone is always available, we don't evaluate their importance. We simply expect them. But when they step back, we are forced to examine what they actually meant to us. And that's when emotions become clearer. Some women will realize they genuinely miss you. Not the attention, not the validation, not the convenience, your conversation, your presence, your energy, your ability to make them smile, the feeling of knowing someone cared deeply. Because despite what many people believe, attention and connection are not the same thing. Attention can come from anyone. Kinch is rare. And when a real connection disappears, it leaves a space that cannot easily be replaced. Then there is another thought that sometimes appears. What if I lost him? Notice the difference between not having someone and losing someone. Those are two completely different feelings. When she believed you would always be there was no urgency, no pressure, no fear. But once that certainty disappears, value often becomes more visible. The possibility of losing something forces people to recognize what they actually had. And sometimes that realization arrives much later than expected. She may suddenly remember conversations from months ago. She may think about your kindness. She may replay moments she barely noticed before. She may wonder why your absence affects her more than she thought it would. Because emotions often become loudest in silence. When you stop chasing, you create space. And in that space, thoughts begin to grow. Questions begin to grow. Feelings begin to grow. Sometimes she reaches out. Sometimes she doesn't. But regardless of her actions, one thing becomes true. She notices. She thinks. She reflects. And that's why constantly chasing rarely creates value. Value is created when people are free to recognize it on their own. You should never stop chasing someone as a manipulation tactic. You should never withdraw attention just to play games. That's not strength. That's insecurity disguised as strategy. The real reason to stop chasing is much simpler. You finally understand that your worth does not depend on someone's response. You understand that love should not require endless pursuit. You understand that mutual effort is the foundation of every healthy connection. And when you reach that point, something changes within you. You stop seeking validation. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop trying to control how someone feels. Instead, you focus on your purpose, your growth, your goals, your peace. Ironically, that's often when people begin seeing your value more clearly because confidence is attractive, self-respect is attractive, emotional maturity is attractive. And nothing is more powerful than someone who can walk away from what isn't meant for them while continuing to move forward with dignity. The moment you stop chasing isn't the moment you lose your power. It's often the moment you finally discover it. The interesting thing is that when you stop chasing, you also stop seeing the situation through desperation. You begin seeing it through clarity. For so long, your emotions may have convinced you that every delayed reply meant she was busy. Every canceled plan was understandable. Every lack of effort was temporary. When you're emotionally invested, it's easy to overlook the reality standing right in front of you. But distance changes perspective. Distance allows you to see what effort was actually being returned. Distance allows you to notice whether the connection was balanced or whether you were carrying the entire weight of it alone. And while you're gaining clarity, something else is happening in her mind. She's beginning to compare. She's comparing the version of her life that included your attention to the version that doesn't. She's comparing the comfort of knowing you cared to the uncertainty of not knowing what you're thinking anymore. She's comparing the energy you brought into her life with the silence that has replaced it. Many women don't fully understand how much a man contributed emotionally until his contribution disappears. Not because they're bad people, not because they're selfish, but because familiarity has a way of making extraordinary things feel ordinary. A kind message every morning eventually feels normal. Someone checking in on you becomes expected. Someone always being available starts to seem automatic. Yet, the moment those things disappear, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. Suddenly, mornings feel different, conversations feel different, the emotional atmosphere feels different, and she starts realizing that your presence affected her more than she admitted. Another thought often enters her mind. Why isn't he chasing me anymore? That question can become surprisingly powerful, because when someone has become used to receiving attention, the absence of that attention creates a gap. The mind naturally wants to fill gaps. It wants explanations. It wants answers. And when answers aren't available, imagination takes over. Maybe he met someone. Maybe he lost interest. Maybe he finally realized his worth. Maybe he's happier without me. Maybe he doesn't think about me anymore. Notice how these thoughts shift the emotional dynamic for a long time. You may have been wondering what she thought about you. Now, she may be wondering what you think about her. The focus changes, the energy changes, the emotional pressure changes. And that's why silence can sometimes communicate more than 1,000 conversations. Not because silence is a weapon, but because silence removes assumptions. When you're constantly available, people assume they'll always have access to you. When you're no longer available in the same way, assumptions disappear. Reality takes their place. She may begin looking for signs. She may notice your social media activity. She may pay attention to small details she never cared about before. Snorts, she may wonder if you're moving forward. She may wonder if you're happier. She may wonder if someone else is receiving the attention she once took for granted. And every one of those thoughts creates emotional movement. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is believing that women only think about men they are deeply in love with. That's not true. People think about those who impacted them. People think about those who challenged them. People think about those who created meaningful emotional experiences. If you brought positivity into her life, she remembers. If you made her feel understood, she remembers. If you consistently show genuine care, she remembers. Even if she never says it out loud, even if her pride prevents her from admitting it, even if she acts completely unaffected, memories don't disappear simply because someone pretends not to have them. And when your presence is removed, those memories often become louder. The mind has a strange habit of replaying what it can no longer access. Moments that seemed insignificant suddenly become meaningful. A simple conversation becomes memorable. A shared laugh becomes valuable. A moment of support becomes unforgettable. She starts revisiting experiences she barely acknowledged when they were happening because now there is space to feel them. Sometimes she becomes frustrated not at you, at herself. Because reflection can reveal missed opportunities. It can reveal things that should have been appreciated more. It can reveal effort that wasn't fully recognized, and that realization can be difficult to face. Nobody likes realizing they took something valuable for granted. Nobody enjoys recognizing that they could have done more. But growth often begins with uncomfortable truths. The more she reflects, the more she may begin seeing you differently. Not as someone who constantly pursued her. Not as someone who was always available. But as someone who genuinely cared. Someone who invested emotionally. Someone who showed up consistently. Someone who offered something real. And that's a very different perspective because when you're chasing, people sometimes focus only on the pursuit. When you stop, they begin focusing on the person. They begin separating your value from your effort. They begin recognizing qualities they overlooked before. Your patience, your loyalty, your consistency, your emotional strength, your ability to care. These things become more visible when they're no longer being freely offered. At some point, snorts, she may also begin questioning her own feelings. This happens more often than people realize. When you're always present, she never has to explore what life feels like without you. There is no contrast. There is no absence. There is no emotional test. But once you're gone, she experiences something new. She experiences your absence. And absence has a way of exposing hidden emotions. Sometimes she discovers she misses you more than expected. Sometimes she discovers she cared more than she realized. Sometimes she discovers that what she thought was casual actually mattered. Because feelings become easier to identify when they're no longer being constantly satisfied. When something is available every day, you stop measuring its importance. When it's gone, you suddenly understand its value. This is true in relationships. It's true in friendships. It's true in life. People often understand significance through absence. That's why your decision to stop chasing can become a turning point, not only for her, for you. Because while she's reflecting, you're evolving. You're learning how to direct your energy toward yourself. You're learning how to invest in your goals. You're learning how to build a life that doesn't depend on someone's validation. And that transformation is powerful. People can sense when someone is no longer operating from need. They can sense when someone has found inner stability. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth. A confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. A confidence that doesn't need attention. A confidence that simply exists. And ironically, that confidence often attracts more respect than endless pursuit ever could. You become harder to ignore because you're no longer trying to be noticed. You become more intriguing because you're no longer seeking approval. You become more valuable because you've stopped giving away your value for free. Meanwhile, her mind continues working. Questions continue forming. Thoughts continue growing. She may remember a conversation where you encouraged her when nobody else did. She may remember moments when you listened without judgment. She may remember times when your support made difficult days easier. The emotional impact of those memories can be surprisingly strong, because genuine care is rare. People encounter attention every day. They encounter attraction every day. But genuine care is different. Genuine care leaves a mark. And marks don't disappear overnight. Even if she chooses not to reach out, even if she never admits what she's feeling, the thoughts remain, the memories remain, the awareness remains. She becomes conscious of your absence in ways she never expected. And sometimes that's when regret begins to appear. Regret isn't always dramatic. It's not always overwhelming sadness. Sometimes regret is simply wondering what could have happened if different choices had been made. Sometimes regret is realizing someone's value after they've stopped trying to prove it. Sometimes regret is understanding a person's importance only after they've walked away. These thoughts often arrive during quiet moments late at night, during long drives, during ordinary days when something unexpectedly reminds her of you. A song, a place, a memory, a conversation. Suddenly, you're back in her thoughts. Not because you're chasing her, not because you're demanding attention, but because your absence created room for reflection. And reflection creates emotional honesty. The truth is, many women expect some men to chase forever. Not because they consciously want to take advantage of them, but because consistency creates expectations. When someone has always been there, it's easy to assume they always will be. When that assumption is broken, reality feels different. The emotional landscape changes, and that's when she starts seeing what she once overlooked. She starts seeing the strength it took for you to walk away. She starts seeing the discipline it took for you to stop reaching out. She starts seeing the self-respect behind your silence, because walking away from someone you care about is not easy. Anyone can stay where they're not valued. Anyone can continue begging for attention. Anyone can continue chasing approval. But it takes strength to choose dignity over desperation. It takes strength to accept uncertainty. It takes strength to let go of what isn't being returned. And whether she says it or not, she notices that strength. She notices that you're no longer controlled by the situation. She notices that your happiness doesn't depend entirely on her response. She notices that you're capable of moving forward. And that realization often changes everything she thought she knew about you. The man she assumed would always stay suddenly demonstrates that he can leave. The man she assumed would always chase suddenly demonstrates that he can stop. The man she assumed would always wait suddenly demonstrates that he values his own time. And those realizations force a completely new perspective to emerge. A perspective where you're no longer viewed through the lens of availability. A perspective where you're seen through the lens of value. A perspective where your absence speaks louder than your presence ever did. And while she continues trying to understand why your silence affects her so much, she may begin realizing something she never expected to realize before. That the attention she once thought was ordinary was actually one of the most meaningful things she ever received. And now that it's gone, every memory, every conversation, every moment of connection starts carrying a weight she never felt when it was right in front of her, causing her to revisit the past again and again, searching for answers, searching for clarity, and wondering whether the person she thought would always be there has already begun writing a completely new chapter without her in it. And that thought can be unsettling, not because she wants control over your life, but because certainty has disappeared. Human beings are comfortable with certainty. We like knowing where people stand. We like knowing who will answer when we call, who will be there when we need attention, who will continue showing up no matter what. When you stop chasing, that certainty vanishes. For the first time, she cannot predict you. For the first time, she doesn't know if you're thinking about her. For the first time, she doesn't know whether you've completely moved on. And uncertainty has a way of making people pay attention. She may find herself checking her phone more often than usual, not because she expects a message, but because a part of her is curious. A part of her wonders if you'll reach out. A part of her wonders if this silence is temporary. A part of her wonders if this is truly the end. The funny thing about curiosity is that it grows when it isn't fed. Every day without answers gives the mind more room to create questions, and those questions often lead back to you. She starts analyzing old conversations. She starts replaying moments in her head. She starts examining things she once brushed aside. Maybe she remembers the time you encouraged her when she doubted herself. Maybe she remembers the way you noticed small details others ignored. Maybe she remembers how consistently you showed up at the time. Those things may have felt normal. Now they feel significant because significance often reveals itself through absence. The mind naturally compares the past with the present. And if your presence added something meaningful to her life, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. Another thing many women think when a man stops chasing is something they rarely admit aloud. Did I make a mistake? That question can arrive suddenly. Sometimes it appears after seeing you happy. Sometimes it appears after hearing about your growth. Sometimes it appears when she realizes nobody else treats her quite the way you did. Because people often assume replacements are easy to find. Attention is easy to find. Validation is easy to find. Real connection is not. Real loyalty is not. Real consistency is not. Those qualities are much rarer than people realize. And when someone loses access to them, they begin understanding their true value. As weeks pass, your absence can start taking on a different meaning. At first, she saw it as silence. Then she saw it as distance. Eventually, she may start seeing it as a decision made by someone who finally chose himself. And whether she agrees with that decision or not, she usually respects it more than she expects to. Because there is something admirable about a person who refuses to beg for a place in someone's life. There is something admirable about someone who knows when to stop forcing what isn't flowing naturally. There is something admirable about someone who values their own peace. And peace becomes very attractive in a world filled with emotional chaos. While she's processing these thoughts, another realization often emerges. You weren't just chasing her. You were investing in her. There's a difference. Chasing is often viewed as pursuit. Investment is something deeper. It is emotional energy. It is time. It is attention. It is care. And when that investment disappears, people feel the difference. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. Like noticing the absence of a familiar song. Like realizing a light that was always on has gone dark. Like discovering that something you barely noticed was actually contributing more than you understood. This realization can make her view your past actions differently. Things she once saw as ordinary begin appearing extraordinary. The effort becomes clearer. The intention becomes clearer. The value becomes clearer. And snorts, clarity changes perception. That's why many people don't fully appreciate what they had until after it's gone. Because perspective often arrives late, very late. Sometimes months later, sometimes years later, sometimes long after opportunities have disappeared. She may begin wondering what your life looks like now, what occupies your thoughts, who occupies your time, whether you're happier, whether you found peace, whether someone else has discovered the qualities she overlooked. These questions are natural because when someone leaves an emotional imprint on your life, curiosity remains. Even if feelings fade, even if circumstances change, even if paths separate, the impact remains. And impact creates memories. The strongest memories are rarely connected to perfection. They're connected to emotion. People remember how they felt. They remember who made them feel understood. They remember who made them feel important. They remember who genuinely cared. Those memories don't disappear simply because communication stops. In fact, silence often makes them louder. Without new interactions to distract the mind, old experiences become more vivid. She starts remembering your laugh, your voice, your energy, your presence, the little things she never paid attention to before. Because the little things often become the big things once they're gone. And as these memories continue surfacing, she may begin recognizing something she never recognized before. Your value was never based on your pursuit. Your value was based on who you were. The kindness, the patience, the effort, the authenticity, the loyalty, the strength, the character. All those things existed before you chased her. They still exist after you stop. The difference is that now they're no longer hidden behind constant effort. Now they stand on their own. And that realization can completely change how someone sees you. Sometimes she begins missing your energy, not because she needs attention, but because every person carries a unique presence. Some people bring calm, some bring excitement, some bring comfort, some bring inspiration. When that energy leaves, life feels slightly different. The change may be subtle, but it's there. And eventually she notices it. She notices that certain conversations don't feel the same. She notices that certain moments feel emptier. She notices that something is missing, even if she struggles to explain exactly what it is. That's the power of genuine connection. Its absence creates echoes. Echoes that linger longer than expected. Echoes that appear during random moments. Echoes that remind people of what once existed. And while all of this is happening in her mind, something important is happening in yours. You're becoming stronger. Not because you're trying to prove a point, not because you're trying to make her miss you, but because you're finally redirecting your energy. Energy that was once spent chasing.